check. Let's go. All right, there we go. What up, y'all? What's going on? Let's see, mic working all right? Yeah, we should be good. And what's up, y'all? Tonight we're covering the 1847 novel Wuthering Heights by Emily Bronte. Now, this one is a trip because I've read this book, I don't know, a few times. I first read it, of course, in 10th grade. I've read it, I don't know, probably 3 or 4 times since then. And I actually read it twice over the last week. And that's because this is a tough one to get a handle on. And what I mean by that is that, it's not a hard read, but it's difficult to get a handle on Heathcliff, on the character of Heathcliff. Heathcliff is the central protagonist in this book, and yes, it's a work of Victorian literature, but it's not. It's sort of a work of high romantic literature. It's certainly Gothic, but it sort of is a critique on Gothic literature, and at the same time, it's like archetypal Gothic literature. So what we're going to do tonight is discuss, first of all, I'm going to give you just a basic plot rundown of Wuthering Heights, what it's about, what happens in it, and then we're going to deep dive into the book. We're going to talk about form and content and meaning, and how Heathcliff is sort of he is certainly a dark protagonist, but he's more than that. I mean, he is the ultimate Byronic hero. He's sort of the ultimate romantic literature hero, but he is certainly not a hero. I mean, he is the protagonist in the book, but he's an antagonist in almost every sense of the word. And we're going to talk about the relationships in the book. It's also difficult to get a handle on the family tree that goes on in this book. But what I'll say just from right off the bat is that Wuthering Heights is, the title of the book is The Place, because the place is kind of outside of time. It's like a primordial, preternatural sort of outside world. And the characters who come in from the outside are from a completely different place. Literally, they're from a different place, but they're sort of figuratively, spiritually, metaphysically from a different place. And Heathcliff and, of course, Catherine typify this sort of, it's kind of an update on King Lear in a number of ways, but there are certainly a number of Shakespearean allusions in the book, most notably King Lear. Of course, we've done King Lear here, and we've talked about the wandering in the wasteland, the going mad, how the outer storm represents the inner storm of the characters. And that certainly is the case with Heathcliff and Catherine, and then later Cathy. And so I'm going to try and make sense for you guys of what goes on in the book, especially concerning the sort of the interrelations that take place, because it's generational. The book is generational. And what's really interesting about the book is that, Emily Bronte and her sister Charlotte published their major works in the same year, 1847. Of course, you probably know about the Brontes, the Bronte sisters, and there's another sister, Anne, of course, tenant at Wildfeld Hall, and they, of course, their books are fiction, but they stand for not only this, Northern English, the heath and the moors, which of course is where. It's not exactly where Macbeth takes place. Remember, Macbeth is the Scottish play. But remember that the Weird Sisters at the beginning of that play say they're to meet, they're on the heath to meet with Macbeth. And so the heath is this wild wasteland where, in a way, like anything is possible, and at the same time, nothing is possible. The book is really popular even now. It's a really popular book, and it sets the stage for these sort of dark archetypal Byronic heroes. I mean, if there's one image that I would would offer for this book that sort of encapsulates the whole thing. It's what we talked about early on in this channel, which is the wanderer above a sea of cloud, right? Which is the back view of the dark hero with the windswept locks staring into the abyss and the misty mountains. Now, there is a lot of mist and fog in the book. There's not necessarily the mountains. It's sort of the North Yorkshire moors, but that is certainly true of the tempestuous nature of their interior lives. And what's interesting is that a lot happens in the book in terms of plot, but at the same time, not much happens because it doesn't take place. It's not it's not Dickensian. It's sort of anti-Dickensian in a way. Heathcliff begins. He's introduced to the reader and introduced into the narrative as a kind of Dickensian orphan, but then his life takes a different route, and he when he disappears at times in the novel. So one thing that's strange about this, and this is why it's hard to get a handle on this character, is that we wonder where Heathcliff comes from. Now, literally in the book, so what happens is it begins with a character named Lockwood. Of course, he's locked in. He's locked into this place and in the story of these people's lives. And he's sort of wandering lost in the heath in North Yorkshire. And he comes upon this house, of course, Wuthering Heights, and he, asks for a place to stay for the night. And he's met with these dark characters with, a brusque manner. And then, of course, we're introduced to Heathcliff. And the story sort of begins at the end in a way. He's given a room, and right away, what happens is he's looking out the window and he sees an image of a ghost. So we're going to dive into what that means, and especially in terms of ghosts, demons, fallen angels in this text. But he sees an image of this woman outside the window who's clearly a spectral character, and then she's saying, "Let me in." And he, falls back in the room, and then Heathcliff, bursts into the room. Who let you into this room? It's there are obviously a lot of parallels to Jane Eyre, especially with the idea of the attic and the child being locked away. And then we get this story from Nellie, one of the caretakers, nursemaids, one of the workers at the house. And we're told this story, and the story is basically that we have a time jump. There are a number of time jumps in this. It takes place. So the novel was published in 1847. It takes place in, let's see, I think the start is 1801, and then we go back 30 years. We jump forward. We're continuously jumping forward in seasons. And what that, of course, indicates is that this is sort of, as Shakespeare says, time out of mind. We're in a different world where we have trouble sort of keeping track of the timeline. And we learned that 30 years before this, the guy who is the master of the house, Earnshaw, this we think kindly old man. I have some things to say about that, but this kindly old man who is the master of the house, his family is there. This is the landed gentry. He arrives at night in a storm. He's been off on business or whatever. He comes home and he greets his children. He's got a number of children. Hindley, not Henley, but Hindley. And of course, Catherine, they're young, and there are a number of other characters. And he sort of uncovers his cloak, and he's got this boy with him. And the boy is a dark character who is described specifically in this as, quote, this is in the text, as a gypsy. And immediately Hindley is threatened by this character. He's an orphan. He was living on the streets. Earnshaw, essentially on business, I think where was he? Liverpool. Takes the boy, brings him home, and adopts him. And then what we see is that Earnshaw treats Heathcliff, that's the name of the child, better than he does Hindley. Hindley is he's not a nice character. He says, "This will never be yours. None of this is yours. You're a runaway." He's a terrible, terrible character. And and he's threatened by him. But anyway, he names the boy Heathcliff. He has a one name. He has one name. He's never referred to as Heathcliff Earnshaw. He's just given the simple moniker Heathcliff. And of course, the symbolism of that is pretty obvious. He's out on the heath, and we see that he's like a character standing on the promontory of the heath looking down into the abyss. He is a pure Miltonian Satan character. Now, of course, not as a child. And we learned through the narrative that he is skittish, of course. We don't know what's happened to him, but he's come from an other place. He is an other, and he is outside of this world that they're living in at Wuthering Heights. And he is raised by Earnshaw. He's supposed to be a member of the family. He's a brother to Catherine and Hindley, and then what happens is. He essentially, Catherine, who is sort of repulsed by him at first, but then takes a liking to him. They're the same age, and they become, playmates and then best friends. Catherine is educated. She's of course, they're educated at home, and Heathcliff doesn't really take to it, but he learns through Catherine, which is later mirrored in the narrative by their children. Then, unexpectedly, Earnshaw, the old man, dies, leaving Hindley the master of the house, who then tells Heathcliff that he has to live in the stables, that he's basically, he treats him like a beast. And that's interesting because Heathcliff goes on to be sort of, he lives in and grows into this beast character. And the way that he ends up treating the other characters in the novel for the rest of the novel is certainly beastly. But what happens is, Catherine and Heathcliff, they don't necessarily fall in love. That would be too simple of a way to describe this. But they're almost like a Gnostic, demiurge Sophia, Neoplatonic, two sides of the same. There's a flip side to that coin. Shout out to the book Heat 2 by Michael Mann, which, of course, that line was from Heat. And I'll be doing, of course, soon, I put this in the community tab, soon I'll be doing a Heat film analysis along with the Heat 2 novel analysis, because he just published a sequel to the book. But they are sort of two sides of the same coin. But then what happens is something really unexpected, and that is that Catherine decides, oh, look at this. Shouts out. I'm going to read these as I get them tonight. Thank you for the super chats, y'all. And thank you to my homies in the chat. Thank you to everybody dropping the links for me. And, of course, you can see the links in the video description, in the channel description, and in the chat. You can support me. Please don't hesitate to support me. I need that. Y'all, it's hard out there. I know we're getting into fall. Everybody's working hard, but I certainly could appreciate I certainly could use and do appreciate your support every time. Thank you to Stephen Mulroney, of course, who is one of our main homies here, who drops $10. Really appreciate you. Thank you so much. And of course, to our homeboy Jethro the Kang, who drops $10. He says, "I'm not bragging, folks. Look, I'm not /crypto." Thank you to you all. I really appreciate your support. So back to the novel. Something unexpected happens, and that is that Catherine decides that she is going to marry the son of sort of their counterparts in this other place called Thrushcross Grange, and she's going to marry this guy named Edgar, who's their age. Heathcliff is broken by this. He leaves. He disappears, and we have a time jump. And what happens is he comes back to Wuthering Heights years later, and he is a made man. He has made his fortune. He's become a gentleman. We don't know how that happened. We don't know where he went, and it's not really discussed or it's not really gone into in the novel. It's just essentially that he left with nothing, except for his, I guess, the how he was raised by his adopted family. Which is a combination of kindness and generosity from Earnshaw, and of course, the terrible treatment that he gets from Hindley. There's a lot of violence in this, and he is treated really, really badly as a child. But he comes back a gentleman at least in appearance and with money, and his shouts out to Countess out there. Really appreciate you. Thank you for that $15. Shouts out to Countess Powers. Really appreciate you. Thank you for supporting me. Really, really do. Thank you. It means a lot to me, and I really can use it. And so he sets his sights essentially on reversing everything that has happened to him from at the hands of Hindley. Okay, and Hindley at this point, Hindley, Hindley, the master of Wuthering Heights, has fallen into essentially alcoholism and gambling, and Heathcliff proceeds to take everything that he has. Hindley, of course, sells his possessions, he sells the estate, and then Heathcliff becomes the master of this place. Then what happens essentially in the plot is that Catherine, who is now the wife of Edgar, is pregnant with a child. I'm going to go into some of the dialogue that occurs between Heathcliff and Catherine, but Catherine dies giving birth to her daughter, Kathy. And that's sort of what's confusing about the novel, because there's Catherine and Kathy. There's also Heathcliff and Hareton. Number of different characters you can get sort of you get bogged down in the lines, the family lines in this in the narrative. But she gives birth and then she dies pretty soon afterwards. And in the before that happens, Heathcliff and Catherine have a couple of key scenes where, he essentially asks her, why did you betray me? Why did you betray? Of course, in the Ray Fiennes version, the 1992 film, he says, why did you betray your own heart? You're murdering me, right? And because Catherine is in love with Heathcliff. They love each other, but the problem is, this is always the problem, this communication. And we talked about this in the Jane Eyre stream, remember, that we did on Charlotte Bronte. They love each other, but they won't tell each other. They won't communicate. And Catherine's motivation, of course, for marrying Edgar is, what she says is that she wants to marry Edgar, who is sort of Heathcliff's he's like the counterpart over at the Grange, and the Grange is like the sunshine, perfection, cleanliness, and order version of the tempestuous disorder and chaos of Wuthering Heights. She wants to marry Edgar not because she loves him, but because he is like her station, and because then she'll be able to lift up Heathcliff in terms of the societal ladder, is what she says. But Heathcliff is betrayed by this, and that sets in motion the events that occur later in the text, and will play into Heathcliff's motivation, because he is basically the 19th century version of the Miltonian Satan character in Paradise Lost, which we've covered, because everything he does is, I think this is sort of a misnomer in the book, because all he does is talk about hate and desolation throughout the rest of that's all he does. And he even says that to Catherine. He says, he hates her, but he wants her to haunt him, and neither God nor Satan can keep them apart, which is why the ghost of Catherine appears at the window. Of course, the window being a symbol of the psyche, and she can't break through. She can't break through to Heathcliff. Well, she dies, and this is kind of like the fact that Kathy, the child, is born out of this is reminiscent of Macduff in Macbeth, right? Because the mother, dies giving birth, and let the angel. What does he say in Macbeth? He says, when he says, "I bear a charmed life, despair thee of thy charm," right? he says, I am, basically, he's not from woman born, right? And in this, we have, like, it's another sort of variation on the fact that Kathy, in a way, Kathy, the daughter of Catherine and Edgar, who, by the way, looks exactly like Catherine. Like she has the same eyes, and that's why Heathcliff like can't look at her. There's a lot about eyes in this book. That, by the way, is reminiscent of Oedipus Rex. Of course, remember the emphasis on eyes and seeing in Oedipus Rex. We did Oedipus Rex. And then what happens is Kathy, who looks exactly like Catherine, except she has blonde hair, signifying that she is like from the light side, right? She's from the sort of Gnostic light side of Thrushcross Grange. Decides that she wants to marry the son of Heathcliff and Isabella, who is named Linton. Now, Heathcliff, because Catherine has gone off and married Edgar, and he goes off and comes back, a gentleman or whatever, marries Isabella, who is Edgar's sister. He tells her almost right away that like he didn't marry her out of love. He hates her. After sort of a time jump, she leaves. She leaves Heathcliff, goes off to London. Then later we find out she's dead. But she's had a son named Linton. Linton comes back, and Heathcliff raises him as his own. There's also another guy. His name is Hareton. Hareton is the son of, Hareton's the son of Hindley, and I forget his wife. His wife's name. And he is treated in the mirror image of the way that Heathcliff was treated by Hareton's dad, Hindley. Does that make sense? So, anyway, then what happens is Heathcliff tries to arrange this marriage between Kathy and who is it? Linton? Yeah, Kathy and Linton. And then he makes them. He wants to make sure that they live at Wuthering Heights. He also ends up taking possession. He owns Thrushcross Grange through a series of maneuvers. But then we come to the end of the novel, and we learn that Heathcliff is haunted by the ghost of Catherine. He essentially goes mad. Like he's not mad. He's not crazy. It's different than that. But he's out on the heath, and then he isolates himself. He starves to death. He dies. And then we have this other guy, Joseph, take possession of Wuthering Heights, and that's the end. Now, so that's the basic plot. And it's not very basic, I know. But that's not really the important thing in this book. And look, you guys, I went through 2 full brand new pens just marking this book, okay? Because there's so much to it. The language is insane. And it's especially insane to think that, this is Emily Bronte's only novel, and that the Bronte sisters mirror their own novels in a number of ways. I won't get too much into their biography, but one thing that's interesting is that all the characters in this either die an early death, or they know they're going to die. They are constantly standing there facing the abyss, or the heath rather, and their own demise. And that's true of the Bronte sisters, right? That sort of informs the novel. Also, I mentioned in that Jane Eyre stream that after the novel was published, this wasn't as popular as Jane Eyre, but then it gained popularity, especially after Charlotte Bronte issued a second printing with some slight revisions in the book. But I will say that what is really interesting about this is that the language is tight. It's Emily Bronte's diction is so completely like in its own world in this, and we can see that from how the book is sort of manifested itself in terms of even popular culture now, right? It's not as simple as like, boy meets girl. Heathcliff is like, you want to at times, and this is sort of the popular concept of Heathcliff, that like people, they see something in Heathcliff and they sympathize with his character, and they see him as like, I guess the bad boy or the dark hero, and he's like driven by this intense, fiery love. But what's interesting is that when you go back to the novel, you realize that it's not really love that drives him. For one thing, Heathcliff and Catherine, I don't think they ever like consummate their relationship. Their relationship is more of a platonic relationship in the sense that, and I don't mean platonic in the like the popular connotation of a platonic relationship. I mean that they are literally like a platonic two sides of some sort of preternatural spirit in the way that Emily Bronte portrays them, and that they are brought together in this time and place. But even then, they can't unite, and they are only united, not even in their death, but in their after death, where they are seen wandering the wasteland of around Wuthering Heights. So at the end of the book, it's reported that people like see their spirits wandering, and this is like it's crazy because there is a scene in this. I think people forget this if they've read it, but. People forget that there's a scene where at the end of the book, Heathcliff is describing what happened after Catherine died. And what happened was he went to the funeral. He doesn't go to the funeral, but he's overlooking it, like he's standing next to this sort of craggy, like broken tree. And the tree imagery in this book is sort of replete like throughout. And he's watching her, she's being laid to rest. And then he says that he goes back because he can't bear separation from her. And he takes a shovel with him. He digs up the coffin. The shovel hits the top of the coffin. He unscrews it. He digs with his hands. And then he pulls the top off and he pulls her body out and he lies with her body overnight. Now, this, I couldn't help but I was just recently watching I wouldn't recommend it, but the new Dahmer series, and of course we hear about this from people like Henry Lee Lucas. That Henry Lee Lucas was a good boy, right? Says W. And this is like, if Heathcliff wasn't a landowner living in isolation in the moors, right? What else would he be? He's like this guy's like, the way that he talks is monstrous. The things that he does are sick. He's certainly like he's it's different from just a devil character. He's continuously described as a devil character. They always call him fiend and devil. That's like that's what they always use those words to describe him. But he's like a demonic, like fallen angel, wandering the earth with his counterpart, completely outside of time and space. It's really weird how she describes him. Let's look at some of the passages in here, because let's see, on page 118. There's so much. There's no way I can possibly cover all of the themes and motifs in this book, but I'll just cover a few of them. This is one of the more Gnostic elements of the text. On pages 118 and 119, he says, "Don't torture me till I'm as mad as yourself," cried he, wrenching his head free and grinding his teeth. The two, to a cool spectator, made a strange and fearful picture. Well might Catherine deem that heaven would be a land of exile to her, unless with her mortal body she cast away her mortal character also. Her present countenance had a wild vindictiveness in its white cheek and a bloodless lip and scintillating eye, and she retained in her closed fingers a portion of the locks she had been grasping. As to her companion, while raising himself with one hand, he had taken her arm with the other, and so inadequate with his stock of gentleness to the requirements of her condition that on letting go, I saw 4 distinct impressions, left blue in the colorless skin. "Are you possessed with a devil," he pursued savagely, "to talk in that manner to me when you are dying? Do you reflect reflect that all those words will be branded in my memory and eating deeper eternally after you have left me. You know how to lie to say I've killed you. And Catherine, you know I could as soon forget you as my existence. Is it not sufficient for your infernal selfishness that while you are at peace, I shall writhe in the torments of hell? I shall not be at peace, moaned Catherine, recalled to a sense of physical weakness by the violent, unequal throbbing of her heart, which beat visibly and audibly under this excess of agitation. So in this scene, what's happening is Catherine is dying, and Heathcliff has come back to see her, and this is what he's saying to her while she's in her death state. I'm not wishing you greater torment than I have, Heathcliff, she said. I only wish us never to be parted. And should a word of mine distress you hereafter, think I feel the same distress underground, and for my own sake, forgive me. Come here and kneel down again. You never harmed me in your life. Heathcliff went to the back of her chair and leant over, but not so far to let her see his face, which was livid with emotion. He walks over to the fireplace where he stood silent with his back toward us. Oh, you see, Nellie, he would not relent a moment to keep me out of the grave. That is how I'm loved. Well, never mind. That is not my Heathcliff. I shall love mine yet and take him with me. He's in my soul. And added she musingly, the thing that irks me most is this shattered prison. After all, I'm tired of being enclosed here. I'm wearying to escape into that glorious world and to be always there, not seeing it dimly through tears and yearning for it through the walls of an aching heart, but really with it and in it. Nellie, you think you are better and more fortunate than I in full health and strength. You are sorry for me. Very soon that will be altered. I shall be sorry for you. I shall be incomparably beyond and above you all. I wonder he won't be near me. She went on to herself. I thought he wished it, Heathcliff dear. You should not be sullen now. His eyes, wide and wet at last, flashed fiercely on her. He gnashed at me and foamed like a mad dog and gathered her to him with greedy jealousy. I did not feel as if I were in the company of a creature of my own species. It appeared that he would not understand, though I spoke to him, so I stood off and held my tongue in great perplexity. You teach me now how cruel you've been, cruel and false. Why did you despise me? Why did you betray your own heart, Kathy? I have not one word of comfort. You deserve this. You have killed yourself. Yes, you may kiss me and cry and wring out my kisses and tears. They'll blight you. They'll damn you. You loved me. Then what right had you to leave me? What right? Answer me, for the poor fancy you felt for Linton, because misery and degradation and death and nothing that God or Satan could inflict would have parted us. You, of your own will, did it. That's crazy. That's a crazy passage, right? This is unlike anything else, especially at the time that the book was published. But this is unlike any other scene in literature in the sense that take Victorian mores and standards of manners and social graces, and this is like completely outside of that, right? I mean, where else have you seen in literature where you have two characters who are in love in a way that is, I mean, just clearly unhealthy, right? But I don't mean to simplify it in that sense, because it's more than that. I think that if we compare this to our own lives, right? As grown-ups, probably everyone has been, in some sort of relationship where, it was unhealthy in the sense that, I don't want to say toxic. That's dumb. I want to say where two people, love each other in a way that it's almost like a neediness. Like they need each other in the sense that they feel like they can't exist without the other person, but they, in a sort of weird cry for attention, like you're hurting the other person by things you say. Does that make sense? I think everybody at least understands, what that is. And like Heathcliff and Catherine are the pinnacle of this, because it's not necessarily that they love each other. Would you call this love, right? Both of them, they never show that they're willing to give, right? What they both do is take. Yeah, Mick says parasitic. It's like they're parasitic off of each other. They have this weird symbiotic relationship, and why don't they just talk to each other and be normal, right? Of course, we wouldn't have a novel. But what I mean is that, that, again, that's sort of simplistic, but, I think that everybody has seen this or been through it in a way. And what's amazing here is that, like, she's on her deathbed, right? She's on her deathbed, and instead of comforting her, he is telling her that she deserves it and that she has killed herself through her actions and through her selfishness. And then, of course, that becomes the driving force for Heathcliff in the rest of the novel, because he is essentially the Satan of wounded pride, right? His pride drives him to damn her so that she will haunt him, so that he will have something of her for the rest of his life. Now, of course, the motivation for that is that we saw what happened to him when he was young. We saw how he had been abandoned. Then he is rescued. He's brought to this place. He's immediately, he immediately becomes the black sheep of the family. And then the guy that loves him dies, right? So he's abandoned. But then he has Catherine. Now Catherine is abandoning him. Of course, he abandons the place, comes back, and then his sole motivation is to reverse everything that's happened to him, to treat others how they've treated him, which is not nicely, obviously. Even though he was given a life and given a place, to live, and given his fortune, but through guile and vindictiveness and this vengeful spirit, he says clearly that he wants to destroy everyone in the family, and the only thing that he wants is to wander in this, like, sort of weird middle inner zone as this, like, fallen spirit with his Catherine, right? And that is like one level of the novel, because what Bronte does through this, like, intricate weaving of the characters and these time jumps is to, like, portray this entire, not just a life and not just a few people's lives and not even just generations, but a whole system of living outside of they're outside of any kind of grace or love by their own choosing, right? Anytime, I mentioned this at the beginning, but anytime anybody comes to Wuthering Heights to see them, or anytime they go to Cross Grange, it's like they're entering a completely different world. They're entering a place where there are other people. There's a societal system. There's love. The families, like, support each other. And then they come back here and it's all, like, just beastly. It's like every man for himself, right? But somehow, because of the English system and Victorian system, and because they're this, gentry, they don't need anything else in terms of their day-to-day living outside of Wuthering Heights. They have they're constantly drinking, they're taking laudanum, they're smoking, they have food, they have milk, they have, they have alcohol, they have wine. And you wonder, like, at least I did, where does this stuff come from? Because they only get a few visitors at a time. It's crazy, right? Is the new Dahmer series good? Well, I would say I wouldn't recommend it, but unless you are up for that sort of thing. I would say that one thing about the Dahmer, just as a sidetrack here, one thing about the Dahmer series is that at least the acting is pretty good. I mean, the guy who plays Dahmer, I keep forgetting, and I'm pretty attuned to this, but I keep forgetting that it's not Dahmer, that it's an actor. I think that it's of course another whitewash limited hangout, in the sense that one of the things is they completely skip over his military service. The stuff with his family is, I think, probably not true. I think there was way more to that. You'll have to see it to know what I mean. And also the weird and creepy and I'd say insidious thing about the show is that the viewer is obviously supposed to find himself sympathizing, and that's just that's it's gross. Yeah, it's pretty weird. But let's see. Going on to Heathcliff's dirge, which is, and the shadowless hereafter is what Emily Bronte calls it. This is chapter 16 and 17 are the central focus of the book. Everything sort of revolves around those chapters. And let's see, we get Kathy, who is the infant child of Edgar and Catherine. Catherine's now dead. And, she's beautiful. And one thing that's interesting is that whenever Kathy, when she grows up a little, is described in the novel, it's always with this euphonist language. Everything is sort of sweet and sunshine and beauty and hope with her, at least up to a point. The language itself becomes poetic. We see the atmosphere and the landscape in a completely different light. And by light, I mean like a literal light, because on the heath and on the moors, it's always darkness and storms and crags and the abyss. But then with Kathy, it's like she sees the blooming heather, and we see the brightness in her eyes, and of course she's given this a sort of a lightened appearance, so that she represents sort of a different anti-aspect of the darkness of Catherine. But when she's an infant, her life resembles, again, Heathcliff's, because it says she is an unwelcomed infant, poor thing. It's terrible. And then it says on page 122, her brow smooth, her lids closed, her lips wearing the expression of a smile. No angel in heaven could be more beautiful than she appeared, and I partook of the infinite calm in which she lay. My mind was never in a holier frame than while I gazed on that untroubled image of divine rest. I instinctively echoed the words she had uttered a few hours before, incomparably beyond and above us all. That's her mother. Whether still on earth or now in heaven, her spirit is at home with God. This is the narrator. Is this Nellie? I think this is Nellie talking, the narrator. So she is not poisoned by the, outside or, anti sort of proto-Gnostic religious vision of the other characters. And it's never described as such specifically, but that is the impression that one gets reading this. It says, I don't know if it be a peculiarity in me, but I am seldom otherwise than happy while watching in the chamber of death, should no frenzied or despairing mourner share the duty with me. I see a repose that neither earth nor hell can break, and I feel an assurance of the endless and shadowless hereafter, the eternity they have entered, where life is boundless in its duration, and love in its sympathy, and joy in its fullness. I notice on that occasion how much selfishness there is even in a love like Mr. Linton's, when he so regretted Catherine's blessed release. Because this is her view, right? Her view of life and death and the afterlife, and that is completely at odds with the other characters. It's at odds with even Catherine's own vision of the afterlife, because we see her wandering, lost, as a ghost, as she's described as a ghost in the novel. And I would say that that's really the only word that one can use to describe how Heathcliff and Catherine end up, as sort of lost ghosts, even though really metaphysically they sort of represent willful fallen angels. They are like wandering the earth. It's their domain because they choose to be outside of a state of grace. It says, let's see, here's Heathcliff, describing Heathcliff. He was there at least a few yards further in the park, leant against an old ash tree, his hat off and his hair soaked with the dew that had gathered on the budded branches and fell pattering round him. He had been standing a long time in that position, for I saw a pair of birds passing and repassing scarcely 3 feet from him, busy in building their nest and regarding his proximity no more than that of a piece of timber. They flew off at my reproach, and he raised his eyes and spoke. "She's dead," he said. I've not waited for you to learn that. Put your handkerchief away. Don't snivel before me. Damn you all. She wants none of your tears. I was weeping as much for him as her. We do sometimes pity creatures that have none of the feeling either for themselves or others. And when I first looked into his face, I perceived that he had got intelligence of the catastrophe. And a foolish notion struck me that his heart was quelled, and he prayed because his lips moved and his gaze was bent on the ground. Yes, she's dead, I answered. Gone to heaven, I hope, where we may every one join her if we take due warning and leave our evil ways to follow good. Did she take due warning then? Asked Heathcliff, attempting a sneer. Did she die like a saint? Come, give me a true history of the event. May she wake in torment, he cried, with frightful vehemence, stamping his foot and groaning in a sudden paroxysm of ungovernable passion. Why, she is a liar to the end. Where is she? Not there, not in heaven, not perished. Where? Oh, you said you cared nothing for my sufferings, and I pray one prayer. I repeat it till my tongue stiffens. Catherine Earnshaw, may you not rest as long as I am living. You said I killed you. Haunt me then. The murdered do haunt their murderers. I believe, I know that ghosts have wandered on earth. Be with me always, take any form, drive me mad. Only do not leave me in this abyss where I cannot find you. Oh God, it is unutterable. I cannot live without my life. I cannot live without my soul. He dashed his head against the knotted trunk and lifting up his eyes, howled, not like a man, but like a savage beast, getting goaded to death with knives and spears. I observed several splashes of blood about the bark of the tree, and his hands and forehead were both stained. Probably the scene I witnessed was a repetition of others acted during the night. It hardly moved my compassion. It appalled me. Still, I felt reluctant to quit him so. But the moment he recollected himself enough to notice the watching, he thundered a command for me to go, and I delayed. He was beyond any skill to quiet or console. So, look, the passage is so... The language here is... Remember, we covered Byron and the Byronic hero, right? And we've covered Milton and Paradise Lost. And what's happening here is he's standing on this crag, right, on the cliff, looking down into the heath where she is being buried. He won't go to be a part of the rite of her funeral, right? And instead, he damns her, calls down her spirit to haunt him. And one thing that's interesting is that he bashes his head against the tree. And it's like it's this lone tree that's there's one tree that's standing on the heath. And the tree's been... remember in Jane Eyre when there was a description of Rochester and Jane Eyre, and like there's like a lightning bolt that has struck the tree, and obviously the lightning, especially, and if we can call to mind, remember in Moby Dick when Ahab is standing at the mast. And he calls down the lightning. He's holding the lightning rod above him, and St. Elmo's fire lights up the what do you call it? What do you call the thing you kill the whale with? Oh my God, I'm totally blanking. The harpoon. Oh my gosh. And lights up the harpoon, and he's like this Luciferian. He is a Luciferian character who has forged Vulcan style this harpoon in the bowels of the ship, and then calls down this sort of lightning, right, to defy his Leviathan, right? Well, the same sort of thing happens in this, in Jane Eyre, right, with the lightning strike that breaks their sort of tree of life in splinters. And then in this, we see when he bashes his head and draws blood, he's called down this spirit. He has cursed himself and his love, and then he draws blood to complete the sacrifice, if that makes sense. I don't see how you could see it really any other way. I think that Bronte was intending that as the symbolism. And I say that because obviously the language throughout this is metaphysical. And Heathcliff is more than just, the dark lover. He's like he's like a lost soul. On page 185, it says, "If you don't let me in, I'll kill you. If you don't let me in, I'll kill you." He rather shrieked, then said, "Devil, devil, I'll kill you, I'll kill you." We get a number of allusions to King Lear, especially in the repetition of the language. There's one part where I'm not going to be able to find it in my notes here. He says, "Never, never, never," which is obviously an allusion to King Lear's "Never, never, 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 never." Remember when he's wandering on the heath with the fool? We see every time we see Heathcliff, he is enwrapped in the Byronic imagery of darkness and anguish. On page 156, wrapped in his fur cloak, his chair. Sorry, I wrote over it. His chair by the fire, and some toast and water or other slop on the hob to sip at. And if Hareton, for pity, comes to amuse him, Hareton is not bad-natured, though he's rough. Young Heathcliff, selfish and disagreeable. He's walking at dusk. The heights were Heathcliff's land, and he was reproving the poacher, malevolence, fiend, devil. Let's see. Oh, and that passage also occurs in juxtaposition to, on page 157, the euphonous language of this idyllic passage. "I put on my bonnet and sallied out, thinking nothing more of the matter. She bounded before me and returned to my side and was off again, like a young greyhound. And at first I found plenty of entertainment in listening to the larks singing far and near, and enjoying the sweet warm sunshine, and watching her, my pet and my delight, with her golden ringlets flying loose behind, and her bright cheek as soft and pure in its bloom as a wild rose, her eyes radiant with cloudless pleasure. She was a happy creature and an angel in those days. It's a pity she could not be content." You see, you hear all the language. There's nothing cacophonous in the language there. Young Kathy is always described as, she's just this larking angel, right? Everything is just innocence in comparison to the descriptions of Hareton, of course, Hindley, and Heathcliff. Heathcliff is sadistic. On page 112 and 113, it says, "I have no pity, I have no pity. The more the worms writhe, the more I yearn to crush out their entrails. It is a moral teething, and I grind with greater energy in proportion to the increase of pain." "Do you understand what the word pity means?" I said, hastening to resume my bonnet. "Did you ever feel a touch of it in your life?" I urged the cruelty and selfishness of his destroying Miss Linton's tranquility for his satisfaction. "In that case, I'll take the measures to secure you, woman," said Heathcliff. "I've no doubt she's in hell among you." See, everything with Heathcliff is just darkness and destruction and desolation. And on page 103, devil, devil, killing me, hatred, beggar, hell shall have his soul, blood, despair, desolation, hellish villain. I mean, I pretty much marked out all of the terms used to describe these characters throughout this. So Countess says, "So does that make Kathy a masochist?" Well, that's a good question. I think that we could certainly describe Heathcliff as sadistic in terms of his temperament and his motivations. On the other hand, I don't think that he is a sadist. Okay, and what I mean by that is, I think he is a Satanist in a number of ways, but I don't think that he's a sadist in that his pleasure, if he has any pleasure, doesn't derive from causing pain to others. It's simply, and it's not simple, but it's simply his motivation and his infernal driving force for revenge, to avenge his wounded pride. And it's like in Tombstone, right? Make no mistake. it's the reckoning he's after. What does he want to avenge? Revenge for being born. A man like that just have a great big hole in the center of their heart where the heart used to be, and not enough killing or robbing can fill it up, says Doc Holliday. And that's probably true of Heathcliff. And I think that all of the death, it's also interesting to consider that the death that occurs, one thing Bronte does pretty cleverly is that the death that occurs, I'm your play for blood, remember? Oh, that's just my game. Fight's not with you, Holiday. All of the death that occurs in this book is accomplished through outside forces, right? The characters, for as much wish as they have to murder the other characters, they never do it because it's already accomplished by the almost third character of where they live, right? They choose to live. They choose to live in this. It's not quite a hell zone, but it's like this inner zone where nature, darkness, and the elements represent the inner desolation of their spirit, right, of their soul, and they sort of bring it on themselves. They sort of wish death on each other, and it is accomplished. I mean, Heathcliff he's kind of a magician in a sense. A lot of the films actually do that. It's not really true of the novel, but especially the 92 version of the film, there's a scene where, Heathcliff and Catherine are outside on the heath, and he says, look, I can make nature speak. Look at that tree, right? Listen, the tree will speak to you. And then these crows come out of the tree, and she says, how did you do that? And he says, I can do lots of things, right? So it's like he's this sort of dark Merlin character who's found his place. And again, he is a foundling. He's a foundling and he's described as a changeling throughout the novel. But it's like, where does this guy come from? We can see the reasons why he acts the way he does up to a point because of how he's treated, right? But there comes a point where, that's not his whole life, right? You have to come to terms with yourself and use his newfound wealth and his apparent good name outside of Wuthering Heights to do good, and he never does anything that he does good in the book is to accomplish his own ends, right? He also it is. I'd say it's satanic in another sense, which is that everything that Heathcliff does is imitation, right? He accuses, he lies by omission, and everything he does is like an imitation of the first half of his life. So anything that happened to him, he just wants to further and to sort of complete this cycle. And I'm not even sure that Heathcliff knows. We learn at the end of the novel that he knows that he has a purpose throughout because the other characters can't figure out his game. What's your game, mate? What's your game? But his game the whole time has been to end up in a place where he could be with Catherine forever. And that is only accomplished in his death. And then his death, remember when Catherine was dying and she says, I can't wait to, break the bounds of reality and to escape this prison planet. I mean, I'm not sure that it is completely Gnostic, but it does seem to have all the hallmarks of it in the book. And I know that, I don't know, but I'm pretty sure that Emily Bronte was not meaning to compose the novel in that sense, but that is certainly the product, if that makes sense. Let's see what Harold Bloom says about it in this book on page 320, this genius book. He says, one could argue with Swinburne if the center of this is taken to be the love which devours life itself, which devastates the present and desolates the future. That is the incommensurate love which already has attained the ghastliness of total identification, the love of Catherine Earnshaw and of Heathcliff. Ghastliness is my reaction, but not at all the view of Swinburne or of Emily Bronte. When Catherine cries, "I am Heathcliff," we are taken into Emily Bronte's realm where none of us could long survive. Who is Heathcliff? Good question, he asks. Who is Heathcliff? What is he? Despite his Byronic stigmata, Heathcliff is neither a grotesque portrait of Byron nor a repetition of the Byronic heroes, Manfred, Cain, Lara. One can begin by observing that Heathcliff's originality, which makes him so difficult to analyze, itself is the signature or assertion of Emily Bronte's anarchic genius. As a child, she sought literary space for her creative will in her invented Gondol world, which was recovered and reconstructed, but except for one lyric, one could have ventured on its basis to prophesy her greatness. Besides Byron, the inevitable triad of the Bible, Shakespeare, and Milton, who, if anyone, is among Emily's authentic precursors. Some minor Gothic romances would seem the only answer. The anonymous bridegroom of Burma, etc. None of these make a difference, and the Bible and Milton are tertiary presences. Byron, greatly transformed, hovers near, but a subtle and rather defensive pattern of Shakespearean allusion emerges in the depiction of Heathcliff. Edmund in King Lear. He's certainly Edmund in King Lear in his sinister workings, right, in his machinations. Hamlet. He also has a touch of Edgar, right, and his madness. Hamlet, Macbeth, Lear himself are woven together in Emily Bronte's demonic crossover, or more traditionally, Catherine Earnshaw's demonic lover. Shakespeare is employed to heighten Heathcliff's tragic dignity, but is not allowed to usurp Heathcliff's rather occult origin and ambiance. Interesting, right? It is never clear by design in Wuthering Heights whether we confront one order of nature or two. There are the crags, which glow in the evening and have preternatural aspects. More crucially, the crags, by the way, in the book are obviously, I don't know about obvious, but I take them as an allusion to where we find Satan at the beginning of Paradise Lost, right? He's lying on the crags before he forms, or before we see pandemonium, right? Heaven is empty and all the devils are here with Satan, all the fallen angels, and he's lying on the crags in adamantine chains before he arises and crosses the abyss in Paradise Lost. More crucially, there's the difficult quest of Heathcliff after Catherine Earnshaw, Linton's death, first to find what I suppose might be called, in Gnostic terms, says Bloom, her pneumatic or spiritual form, and then to unite with it. So in other words, are we saying that when Catherine dies, she gives up her prison planet form, right? She shuffles off her mortal coil only to wander as this sort of spirit, then to be united with her platonic other, who is Heathcliff, and then they will wander this sort of wasteland together. It's amazing how many works we've read, and this is not by design, but how many works we've read that involve a wasteland, right? I mean, countless books and poems that we've read involve the wasteland or the abyss. It's crazy. Obviously that's a motif in a lot of the literature that we've read, and we've done a lot of dark, romantic or Romanesque books. But that is crazy. It is it seems to be a recurring sort of third character. And yes, please make sure you guys, thank you for being here tonight on this cool, crisp, fall, autumnal evening outside. Ooh, I got my cool, crisp Red Bull. Ooh, it's cool and crisp outside, you guys. So please make sure you smash that like. Thank you for sharing the stream, all you guys. Thank you for being here. And please, if you want to support me, please don't hesitate to support me. I can't tell you how much I appreciate your support, because we're fighting the globalists. We really need it. We need that money, folks. No, we do. We really need them. Really could use that money. Really could use your support. And so, yes, I really, really would appreciate that. If you are so inclined. So I thank you so much. This says, like Heathcliff, something in her, in Catherine, goes back to before the creation fall into nature, but something does not and is merely natural like the rest of us. Yeah, like I said, they sort of exist in this preternatural world, right? Where normal human beings are, toxified and infected by their own stratagems, their own lives, the sort of hell world of their interior lives, right? So BLA /crypto. And then they disappear again, right? And whenever the characters leave, they immediately, when they're out of range of Wuthering Heights, especially when they're in the sort of the radius of the radiant Thrush-Cross Grange, everything sort of seems to lighten, and they have promise and purpose. So it's like Wuthering Heights itself is this damned, Middle Earth hell zone. There's little question but that Emily Bronte represents her own lyric persona in Catherine Earnshaw's otherness. I was just talking about otherness, right? In the sense of her I am Heathcliff, but it is a mystery, an aesthetically impressive one, that an 18-year purgation is imposed upon Heathcliff in his peculiarly posthumous sojourn as he wants to find and join his Catherine. He is still a child yearning for a transcendental fulfillment that has no doctrine to explain it. No critical analysis of Heathcliff will work because always there is a missing element. And yet this is not obscurantism on Emily Bronte's part. She is a knower, though not to be subsumed into the rubric of any historical Gnostic sect. In other words, she's Gnostic sort of in spirit, but not in terms of her theology, if that makes sense, right? Is what Bloom says. Heathcliff negates all received tradition, including his Byronic and Shakespearean affiliations. On some level, perhaps, never to be apprehended, Heathcliff is Emily Bronte's strong critique of the high romantic tradition of representing and exalting male desire, but no one has been able to expand that critique. There are almost as many Heathcliffs as there are Hamlets. So, in other words, it's hard to pin down Heathcliff as a character type. We, meaning readers, in our analysis of Heathcliff from the canon, since its publication, have sort of tried to pigeonhole him. And popular culture has certainly done that, but many times, as I said at the beginning of the text, incorrectly. I mean, I think Heathcliff is also much harder to understand and pin down than, for instance, Ahab, right, in Moby Dick. But even Ahab is often misunderstood in terms of critical analysis, as is, of course, Frankenstein, right? And again, by the way, today I saw a description of some film, and it said something about, I think it was a David Harbour movie, and it said something about Frankenstein's monster's monster. So we already debunked that in our Frankenstein analysis. A couple of other things that I wanted to bring up would be that a lot of times in literature, one can understand works of literature, or at least characters in literature, by looking on the periphery, right? I mean, I've said before how, an understanding of, especially of popular culture, can be gleaned by looking sort of slightly askew. For instance, that's one of the things that we accomplish by analyzing fiction, right? Because fiction is, obviously, truth is stranger than fiction, yes. But we often gain a sense of truth by reading fiction that we cannot gain through, the detective facts of history. And so I think that one way I understand Wuthering Heights has always been to look at some other artists that were obviously influenced by this. One would obviously be, I was going to talk about Kate Bush tonight and her song Wuthering Heights, but that would be too much to go into. But even with that, we have a tangent from the Wuthering Heights song, and I think that Hounds of Love is probably a better way to describe Wuthering Heights, or a better way to understand Wuthering Heights than even her song Wuthering Heights is. Because, of course, the Hounds of Love and the Hound of the Baskervilles and the Hounds, there are a number of different scenes in Wuthering Heights that have dogs. For instance, Catherine is attacked by the dogs outside on the heath. They're these sort of devil dogs, which then lead her to go to Thrushcross Grange for treatment, and that's when she ends up meeting Edgar, and then that leads to her later marriage to Edgar. Right now, I'm not saying that is a causal series of events, but I'm saying that informs and gives a sort of an atmosphere to what happens in the novel. So one thing is the poem Wuthering Heights by Sylvia Plath. And Sylvia Plath, again, is like on the periphery of this because she was married to Ted Hughes, and Wuthering Heights is Ted Hughes territory, like literally. He was, he's a Yorkshireman, and his poems, being as beastly and animalistic as they are in terms of his worldview, are certainly informed by the same atmosphere. And in her poem, Wuthering Heights, she says, "There is no life higher than the grass tops or the hearts of sheep, and the wind pours by like destiny, bending everything in one direction. I can feel it trying to funnel my heat away. If I pay the roots of the heather too close attention, they will invite me to whiten my bones among them." So she's Catherine, right? In the poem, she's taking on the persona of Catherine. And of course, saying there is nothing higher is exactly where these characters are in terms of their metaphysics, right? And even the misuse of the word destiny occurs actually in Wuthering Heights. There's a part where one of the characters, just from memory, one of the characters says something like, "I didn't mean to come here to alter your destiny." If you believed in destiny, would that be altered, right? And she says, her only destiny, of course, is to lie amongst the heather with her bones whitening, and then to escape, to shuffle off her mortal coil, to wander the wastelands with her demon ghost, Heathcliff. She says, "The sheep know where they are, browsing in their dirty wool clouds, gray as the weather, the black slots of their pupils that take me in. It is like being mailed into space, a thin, silly message. They stand about in grandmotherly disguise, all wig curls and yellow teeth and hard marble bass. I come to wheel ruts and water limpid as the solitudes that flee through my fingers, hollowed doorsteps from grass to grass. Lintel and sill have unhinged themselves. Of people, the air only remembers a few odd syllables. It rehearses them moaningly. Black stone, black stone. The sky leans on me, the one upright among all horizontals." That's a brilliant image, because that is Wuthering Heights in terms of the atmosphere. We get all horizontals, all landscape, except for the lone tree and the monolithic stone that stands where Heathcliff and Kathy have one of their not a sexual tryst, but a romantic interlude. "The sky leans on me, the one upright among all horizontals." So now it's like she's vertically sacrificing herself to this monolith. "The grass is beating its head distractedly. It is too delicate for life in such company. Darkness terrifies it. Now in valleys narrow and black as purses, the house lights gleam like small change." So one other thing I find interesting in this is that, if the people in the narrative were not there, would anything really change in the novel in the sense of the greater world around it? Well, it would change the characters at Thrushcross Grange. Of course, the Grange, like I said at the beginning, sort of exists as a kind of anti-Wuthering Heights, right? And there's a flip side to that coin. What are you, a monk? I got a woman. What if you do got me boxed in? Because I will not hesitate, not for a second. But if it's between you and some guy whose wife you're going to turn into a widow, then brother, you are going down, says Al Pacino in Heat. Look forward to our Heat analysis, where we'll be doing lots of cringe impressions of Al Pacino and Robert De Niro. You know what they're looking at? These guys are good. You know what they're looking at? What are they looking at, boss? You know what they're looking at? They're looking at us. Okay, motherfucker. Remember that? Okay, so in let's see, in Ted Hughes's Lupercal, He says in the poem November. Now, this has nothing to do with Wuthering Heights except for the fact that it informs the atmosphere of the book. And is really a fall. This is really a fall, totally autumnal poem. It's called November. He says, the month of the drowned dog. There is a scene in the book, in Wuthering Heights, where one of the characters, I think it's Nellie, describes Heathcliff as the kind of guy who's out. She calls him a cat strangler. She says, let's see, and it says, also the word catgut, page 213. I ought to have sweat blood then from the anguish of my yearning, from the fervor of my supplications, to have but one glimpse. I had not one. She showed herself, as she often was in life, a devil to me, says Heathcliff. And since then, sometimes more and sometimes less, I've been the sport of that intolerable torture, infernal, keeping my nerves at such a stretch that if they had not resembled catgut, they would long ago have relaxed to the feebleness of lintons. When I walked on the moors, I should meet her coming in. She was either outside the window or sliding back the panels or entering the room or even resting her darling head on the same pillow as she did when a child. It was a strange way of killing. This passage on page 213 in Wuthering Heights. This is chapter 29 towards the end of the book. Really encapsulates Heathcliff's motivations. And he says, it was a strange way of killing, not by inches, but by fractions of hairbreadths, to beguile me with the specter of a hope through 18 years. And then it says, his eyes were fixed on the red embers of the fire. Because the eyes, again, play a significant part in the book, the way that the eyes mirror generationally the former characters. And that Heathcliff himself is described every time as being dark. Obviously his dark complexion, as it describes him, he's a gypsy. His dark complexion and demeanor mirrors the inner tempest of his soul and his black eyes, right? He continuously has eyes that gaze out on either blackness and desolation, which is the desolation of himself, his soul and his future. And his intentions, or they're always looking at fire. And this is pure Byronic imagery, right? He's either standing alone in the solitude of darkening sky, outside amongst the crags and the abyss and the heath, or he is standing inside by the hearth, but he's not a warm character, he's a fiery character, right? He is a dark, fiery character, forged under the volcano by Vulcan. It says in this poem, the month of the drowned dog, after long rain, the land was sodden as the bed of an ancient lake, treed with iron and birdless. In the sunk lane, the ditch, a deep silent all summer, made brown foam with a big voice. That and my boots on the lane scrub stones and the gully leaves against the hill's hanging silence. Mist, silvering the droplets on the bare thorns, slower than the change of daylight. And then there's another poem by Ted Hughes, and this one that I got when I was at university by Simon Armitage, selected by Simon Armitage. Selected, Bo Selector. We're in Northern England. And it's called February, and it says, the wolf with its belly stitched full of big pebbles, Nibelung wolves, barbed like black pine forest against a red sky over blue snow, or that long grin above the tucked coverlet, none suffice. A photograph, the hairless knuckle feet of the last wolf killed in Britain, spoiled him for wolves. The worst since has been so much mere Alsatian. Now it is the dream, cries wolf, where these feet print the moonlit doorstep or run and run through the hush of Parkland, bodiless, headless, with small seeming of inconvenience by day too, pursue, siege all thought. Bring him to an abrupt pouring stop over engravings of gibbet-hung wolves, as at a cage where the scraggy Spanish wolf danced, smiling, brown eyes, doggily begging a ball to be thrown. These feet, deprived, disdaining all that are caged or storied or pictured. Through and throughout the true world search for their vanished head. For the world vanished with the head, the teeth, the quick eyes. Now, lest they choose his head, under severe moons he sits, making wolf masks, mouths clamped well unto the world. That is essentially what Heathcliff is, right? He's both so much mere Alsatian, and he's also searching for the wolf head, right, of his own personal demon world. Under severe moons, his mouth clamped well onto the world. So that is that's Ted Hughes and Sylvia Plath. We also talked about Harold Bloom right there, and his analysis. Let's look at some of these super chats. Let's see. Sweet. Andre Kane sent $10 for always giving the most based lit analysis. Thank you so much. Really appreciate you. I try to give a somewhat decent basement analysis of some of these classic works of literature. So thank you so much. I really appreciate you. Thank you so much for supporting me. John Adams sent $5. Thank you. He said he's watching live, but 10 minutes behind. Crazy Heathcliff line that made my jaw drop in chapter 27. Had I been born where laws are less strict and tastes less dainty, I should treat myself to a slow vivisection of those two as an evening's amusement. Yeah. So Heathcliff's, one thing that I find interesting about the work is that Heathcliff is in the book more than, for instance, than Ahab is, or even than Rochester is in Jane Eyre, or than the monster who is Frankenstein is in the book. Remember, Frankenstein and the monster are never in the same scene. They're the same person. It's just DID. And Heathcliff, you wonder what Heathcliff did, right, when he went off to London or wherever he went. I assume he went to London. This is obviously before Jack the Ripper, but he's in a way, he's a perfect characteristic of that sort of, psychotic, dark antagonist. Great quote. Thank you so much, John Adams. Thank you for dropping that $5. Really appreciate you. And then, whoa, look at that. Yo, shouts out to our wonderful OG, beautiful human being, and our friend here, Tamara Hathaway, who has an awesome channel, by the way. Please, if you don't know her channel, she's got a YouTube channel, and it's wonderful. She just recently released a new video. She makes awesome videos, and she is amazing. She's been around for a long time. She's one of the OG Chad nerds, and she sends a huge... Wow, I don't even know what to say. Thank you so much. I really appreciate you. I love you so much. She sent me $200, which is really, that is so incredible. Thank you for being such a generous and amazing person and a good friend, and I really appreciate that. Wow, you got me right here. So thank you so much. You are so awesome. That is amazing. That helps me out a lot. You guys, these, look. I love doing this. We're gonna keep doing this, obviously, and I'd be buying books anyway. But the books are expensive. The damn electric bill is crazy. But you know what? I'm not gonna talk about that because that would be annoying if I talked about that. So thank you so much, Tamara. I really appreciate you. Thank you to everybody who supports me. Thank you to everybody for leaving awesome comments in the videos afterwards. Those are amazing. And you guys, yeah, we're almost up there. We're almost at 1,000 subs. Can you believe it? I mean, I'm so thankful to you all. We've done this all from the ground up. We've all it's just us analyzing literature. So I can't believe that, we have I can't believe we have the watch hours that we do. I'm not going to share the analytics, but we've really been doing well here at the channel, and we're almost up there to 1,000 subs. I can't believe it. So thank you so much. And of course, as promised, when we get to that 1,000 subs, we're going to do a 1,000 sub party, and we're just going to be doing fun stuff. We're going to be doing analysis of Caddyshack. And whatever else you guys want. If you want me to cover anything, if you want me to cover a book, this book was requested. It wasn't a sponsor stream, but this book was requested a bunch over the past many months, actually. Shouts out to all the people who have requested the dark Victorian literature, because I enjoyed going through that. And let's see, coming up, of course, we have The Giver. I was going to do The Giver a long time ago, but then it kind of got put aside for the other stuff. And one of my homeboys recently requested that I do that, so I'm going to cover The Giver, deep analysis on some dystopian literature. And we're, of course, going to be covering, like I said, I actually have the copy right here. People probably don't know that this even exists yet, but it's brand new. It's Heat 2 is the name of the novel by Michael Mann. And it's a sequel to the 1995 movie Heat, which is one of my favorite movies. And it's the story of Val killing it. Chris Shaherlis, remember, he's one of the survivors in Heat. And it's his life up till 2002. I'm kind of going out of my normal thing here by covering. I'm going to cover some. People have requested a lot of people have requested, fantasy literature. So I decided to go with what I know from when I was a youth. I read these books when I was, 7 or 8, and this is the Chronicles of Pride Dance by Lloyd Alexander. It's a 5-book series. I just got it today. Haven't even unwrapped it. And this is where you guys may know this because they made a bad version, a Disney version of The Black Cauldron, which is the second book in this series. And it's similar to Lord of the Rings, but quite different. And it's by an American author from the mid-20th century. The Book of Three, The Black Cauldron, The Castle of Lear, Terran Wanderer, and The High King. So I'm going to be covering all 5 of those books. And if you want to sponsor a stream, please don't hesitate to drop me a fat chat, and I will. I'll definitely look into it. Please share the stream. Help me get the subs up. Tell your friends. Tell your family. Shouts out to our homeboy over there, Cotel, Church of the Eternal Logos, David Patrick Henry. Just kidding, David Patrick Harry, who did an awesome 4.5 hour, almost 5 hour stream last night. You guys. Birthday call-in stream. So shouts out to DPH because it was his birthday yesterday. And there were some great call-ins, especially from our homegirl, Based Homeschool Mom. Shouts out to Rachel, Based Homeschool Mom. And that was cool. We also saw Keenan and a bunch of other people on there. Shouts out, of course, to JD over at Jay's Analysis and to Jamie. And I know BHM has some stuff coming up with Jamie. And shouts out to Exposing Powerful Lies live streams, Jerry. Shouts out to TGF, my homeboy out there. Nick, thank you so much for supporting me and loving me. You're a great friend. Shouts out to Jeff. Mixkey, shouts out to Mikhail. Tech Noir Graphics at Instagram. Speaking of Instagram, Jeff reminded me, please, you guys, if you haven't, go over to my Instagram, Bays Lit Analyzer, over to Instagram, and sub to me there. I just put up all the stuff for the streams so you can get notified. And shouts out to all of our homies out there. Really appreciate you. Let's see. Did I have one? I think another super chat came in. It was also my dog's birthday yesterday, y'all. She's 16. Shouts out to, let's see, who's this? Do I get a name on this one? Oh, yeah. Shouts out to our girl. Shouts out to our homegirl out there. Slow Boy Whiteboard, of course. Kristen, who drops $20. Really appreciate you, Kristen. And you guys go to Slow Boy Whiteboard. I'm always lurking on her videos. She especially the breaking of the wand ceremony video. That was crazy. So she's always got good stuff. Thank you so much. Really appreciate you. Dog's over there asleep. She had some good treats for her 16th birthday. She's driving the car now, y'all. So, I'd pick her up and show her to you, but she's asleep. She's 16. Mick says, regarding Henry. You want me to do regarding Henry with Harrison Ford? Wasn't that a Harrison Ford movie? That's about all I got, you guys. Thank you so much. Again, thank you to Steven. Shouts out to T.H. Thomas Henderson. Shouts out to Andrea. Shouts out to Kristen, John Adams, all my homeboys, homegirls out there. And especially big shout out to Tamara, really, and to Countess and to Tamara. Really appreciate you. Thank you so much. That's about all I got. I hope you guys have a wonderful weekend, a nice fall weekend. The leaves are already starting to fall. And it's a nice, cool, and crisp autumn night. And I will see you guys soon with another analysis. Thank you so much. Really appreciate y'all. All right. Peace.